One of the most important things in life is our choices. And I see out in the audience some people who are of the age of maturity like myself. And so you have experience with choices. Choices are one of the most important things, if not the most important thing in our life. As you age and as you grow older, you're going to notice that people around you change, meaning your friends are going to change. The people that you knew when you were, say, in elementary school, some of them you no longer talk to in middle school. Then when you hit middle school, those people seem to change again, and you get to high school and you're with different friends. And then you go to college, and as you get to college, you find that some kids went to college, some kids did not go to college. Some people travel one road, some people travel another, and as you go through life, you start to see the accumulation of choices. I had friends in like 6th grade who were not my friends in high school because they got into drugs. Now that's a common thing we hear on television and advertisements and in campaigns to not use drugs. But for me, it was a personal thing because he was my best buddy in 6th grade. We always sat next to each other again in 7th grade. But around 7th grade, I started trying to play sports, and he wasn't that into sports, but we still sat next to each other. But by the time I got to my sophomore year of high school, I remember passing him in the hall, and we didn't even really acknowledge each other anymore. He had made choices that were different than my choices. Making good choices will determine what happens in your life. And the friends around you will determine what choices you make. One of my friends, even to this day, we've been friends for over 40 years back in my hometown, was one of the reasons that I made good choices. We were best friends. And he became my friend, and we did a lot of things together, really everything together. Maybe you remember, or you currently have a friend who you could literally finish each other's sentences or anticipate what the other person was going to choose. And you helped each other make good choices. When I would try, and my friend's name was Scott Baker, or is Scott Baker, when I would like a certain girl, but he knew that wasn't going to work out, he'd go, "That's not going to work out. Just leave it alone." When I might say, "Hey, I'm going to try to accomplish this thing," he'd say, "You might want to try this thing over here. It'll work out better for you." I think as we get older, we don't think choices matter anymore, but they do. And another thing it matters for is the friends we have. Some of you are sitting here today and you have friends who are thinking about being a Christian, or maybe they've begun studying the Bible, or maybe they've become coming to church and they're trying to interested in God, but they're not sure what to do with it. Part of our life responsibility as people who believe in God is to help our friends make good choices. Making good choices is making the decision to change. So let's get into that. Good choices. Exodus 23, verse 2. Don't do something just because everyone else is doing it. If you see a group of people doing wrong, don't join them. You must not let them persuade you to do wrong things. You must do what is right and fair. You know, in the Old Testament, a lot of people don't look at the Old Testament. It's got a lot of good stuff in it. But what this passage is telling all of Israel is that in order to build a great nation, you've got to make good choices. And your choices are going to be almost always about your capacity to resist what the crowd is doing. Your capacity to be able to stand and say, "Hey, I know what's right, and because I know what's right, I'm going to do what's right regardless of," notice the word here, "the persuasion that is put upon me." We live in a society right now that increasingly doesn't think that Christianity or the Bible is the way to go. And so because of that pressure, it's easy to be persuaded to take a path that God has not told us is the best path. And all of us have to look at the choices we make and who influences our choices. Because good choices are about being able to stand up and say, "Yes, I know everybody on social media is saying do this, but I know what's right is I need to do that." Almost everything that's happened in the world that has been destructive has been about large groups of people being caught up in what the crowd is doing. It's historic, and it's a pattern of human behavior. If you were in high school, you may remember the pressure to use drugs, the pressure to sleep around, to quote unquote hook up. And a lot of us, even in this room, don't talk about the pressure we feel every day to be persuaded to do something the world tells us is right when we know it's wrong. It takes a lot of courage to do that in order to make good choices. The number one thing we have to deal with and focus on in order to make good choices is our heart condition. Now, when I was growing up, I didn't deal with my heart. The heart is the seat of the emotions. And the heart is where we make almost every decision we make. Our emotions are powerful. And oftentimes we don't talk about that. Our emotions can take over our life completely. They can cause us to believe things that aren't even real. Much of what goes on with misinformation that you, I'm sure, are familiar with in the world is really about getting people emotional. Misinformation is not about facts. It's about, can I trigger you to be emotional about something? And if I can get you emotional about something, I can persuade you to believe it. And so dealing with our heart condition is important. That was a real challenge for me as a kid because around about 11 years old, 12 years old, I felt like every time I felt something in my heart, I would feel pain. Pain about what people thought about me, pain of rejection. That was my least favorite, still is. And as a result, I wanted to suppress my emotions. Have you ever done that where you just push everything you feel down so that you don't feel anymore? Some people in the Bible calls that hardening. I became a very hardened person. And because I became hardened, I didn't have to feel anything. And because I didn't have to feel anything, I drew the conclusion I can never be hurt. No one will ever hurt me again. Because I remember being hurt around 12 years old, and I said, I'm never going to be hurt again. I'm never going to share anything personal with anybody. I'm never going to let anybody know what I really think. I'm going to keep it all inside. I was making a choice about my heart condition. I was making a choice that was going to end up limiting my ability to be close to people, limiting my ability to understand and feel love, limiting my ability to be intimate. And a lot of times as men, we don't talk about or deal with those issues, but they're important for women as well. Harden hearts. That's what I did. I hardened my heart to the rejection I was experiencing at home, in school, and we can experience rejection that nobody's even rejecting us. We just feel rejected. What's it say about the hardened heart? Matthew 13:14. This fulfills the prophecy of Isaiah that says, when you hear what I say, you will not understand. When you see what I do, you will not comprehend. This is Jesus speaking, and he's saying, when I talk, you're not going to understand it. And when you see what I do, you're not going to get it. You're not going to comprehend it or understand it. Verse 15. For the hearts of these people are hardened, and their ears cannot hear, and they have closed their eyes. So their eyes cannot see, and their ears cannot hear, and their hearts cannot understand, and they cannot turn to me and let me heal them. If you and I harden our hearts, we will not be able to understand God. Making good choices is making the choice not to harden when pain comes. Making good choices about continuing to feel even when feeling is uncomfortable. Making good choices is about not burying yourself in bitterness toward other people or burying yourself in the distractions of media, whether it be social media, it be streaming media. Oftentimes what happens with human beings, for me, it was basketball. I would run the sports in order to get away from anything I might feel. That's hardening. If you find yourself unable to explain your emotions or communicate your emotions, oftentimes that's because you've hardened to something. We can harden to things as simple as people laughing at us or making fun of us. And I got made fun of a lot between the ages of 8 and about 11. I mean, it was like I thought people were being paid to make fun of me. They either made fun of me being too short or my head being too big. They made fun of my teeth. They made fun of my nose. I'm not even sure those things needed to be made fun of, but that's what happened. A lot of times we even look at our own face in the mirror and we make fun of it going, well, how did I get this face? How did I get that nose? How did I get that hair? We're looking at ourselves in the mirror and going, why don't I have a different kind of body? Sometimes we even get into emotionally bad areas and dark places about our body image. And a lot of times, all of that pain makes us harden. For guys, all it takes is one girl to reject us. And that can send us on a cycle of suppression that will last into our 80s because we just can't bear it. Let me tell you what, ladies, all you got to do is, and you don't have to say yes to a guy, don't get me wrong. But all you got to do is say, or suggest no. And guys are knocked out. They'll act like they don't care, but at night they're listening to that kind of dark music, with dark emotions, all that music where you yell and they're swearing and people are beating, hitting guitars against the stage and doing. This is what men do because our hardened feelings make it difficult to express what we really feel. How many of you as guys can actually express emotions that are not anger or ecstasy? A lot of times as men, we have two real good emotions. We get mad or super happy. And we don't understand there's a whole constellation of emotions other than that. What is that? That's hardening. A lot of times as women, right, we can get feelings toward other women in particular. You know what I'm talking about, ladies? You should know better than me. You're the women. And you get these feelings, and then you can harden to another woman. Have you ever done that? You ever done that? You should talk to each other about that. That's as much as I know about the subject. Verse 15, for the hearts of these people are hardened, and their ears cannot hear, and they have closed their eyes, so their eyes cannot see, and their ears cannot hear, and their hearts cannot understand, and they cannot turn to me and let me heal them. If we harden our hearts, it will be impossible for God to help us and heal us, and it will also be difficult for us to make friends. Do you know what? More important than being socially skillful in relationships is our capacity to be soft-hearted in relationships.